is the unfolding. This is the unfolding. This is the unfolding, written with the gold that you become gripped by the scriptures you are holding. This is the unfolding, written with the gold that you become gripped by the scriptures you are holding. Whether preaching or getting in devotions, the glory of Christ is the picture you're beholding. May the depth of the riches of his excellent scriptures give you a sense you're swimming in this ocean. I know you get that you are chosen, but I pray you'll flip through the Old Testament scripts to know him.
The unfolding. The unfolding of the Old Testament and the New. The New unfolds what really is in the Old Testament.
So the purpose of this album is to trace Old Testament themes to see how God's working out the outcome. They find the fulfillment in Christ and his people. The Old Testament's the preview like it's a prequel. And of course Westminster service. Double albums, particular purpose, by teaching me tools like Greek and Hebrew and hermeneutics for in-depth scriptural searches. It enriched my family, strengthened our worship. But as I spent 5 years digging in verses, the deeper I dug into the riches of Christ, the more I realized that I'm just skimming the surface. Its organic unity starts like an acorn that through redemptive history grows as it takes form. By the end it's a full-blooming oak tree, revealing the glory of the crucified and raised Lord. The New Testament writers assume these assumptions. The OT is Christ-centered truth in abundance. It's important you see this. They use Old Testament language to paint inspired portraits of Jesus, cause ultimately the scriptures are one scroll that through progressive revelation it unfolds. Thus the Old Testament, and of course the New, is Christ's story, and since we're in him it's our story too. The New Testament writers would ground what they wrote in Old Testament allusions with thousands of quotes. And what I found is so dope. Each of these themes are like strands that are tightly bound in a rope. So Jesus Christ has it all together, the high exalted treasure, who will magnify forever. So as we're done beholding his unfolding story, may we see it's all about the Son's holy glory.
How is it that we can make the Old Testament useful to us? The church has not always been sure what to do with the Old Testament. Another answer that's been given to this particular question in the history of the church is that the Old Testament is pretty much exclusively for Israel. There is some other plan of salvation there. It's not that which we find for the church. So I think the church has been a little confused on this subject of what to do with the Old Testament. I remember some years ago as a student at Westminster listening to my teacher, Ed Clowney, describing the relationship between the Old Testament and the church on the part of many is that it's Bartlett's book of quotations, poorly organized. And we kind of flit through it, finding something edifying that we might extract, and then occasionally, on those occasional Old Testament sermons you hear, apply one of those nice stories to the church, and usually end with "Go thou and do likewise," or "Go thou and don't do likewise." In the Presbyterian tradition, we have usually related ourselves to the Old Testament by seeing there the same God working the same plan of redemption for his people. And as Christians, we want to be able to read the Old Testament as a Christian book. The Old Testament ought to mean something to us that it wouldn't mean in a synagogue. We ought to be able to read that 3/4 of the Bible with the veil removed.